What's going on, guys? I'm Pete and welcome to Retro Game Attic. Recently I made a video on how to hook up your North American top-loader NES to a Famicom Disk System. And in that video, my Famicom Disk System was just not working well at all. It couldn't read discs to begin with, and then the whole thing was making like a weird grinding noise. So the consensus in the comments is that it probably needed a new belt. So in this video, I'm going to go over how to replace a belt in your Famicom Disk System, and then also how to do a spindle head adjustment just to fine-tune everything and make sure you're good to go. So let's jump into it. So here I have my Famicom Disk System hooked up to my North American NES top loader console, and I'm going to power it on. And as you can see, all is working in that regard, but whenever I set a disc inside the console, it kind of makes like a grinding noise and it doesn't seem to read. It might be a little hard to hear, but hopefully the mic is picking it up a little bit. And it's trying to load the disc, and this is where it gets stuck and like just perpetually loading. So we'll try another disc and see if that loads. That red reading light comes on and you get that grinding noise again, and it's just stuck perpetually loading. So the Famicom Disk System doesn't seem to be reading discs, as you can see. I know these things have a reputation for being pretty finicky, and usually the solution to fix these is to replace the belt. Luckily I ordered a set off of eBay and they just came in, so let's get into replacing it. So before we open up the console, I figure I'll show off the belts that I ordered. I got these from No Game No Life off of eBay. These were a total of $8.99 shipped from Japan. There are a total of 10 replacement belts, so I should be in good shape for a while. And they were even nice enough to handwrite us a little note with that little sketch of Yoshi. Pretty cool. I'll be sure to throw a link to these guys, their eBay store, in the description so you guys can check them out. So let's get started with opening up the console. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do here is remove the 6 Phillips head screws that are attaching the two console halves together. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Alright, now we got the 6 screws out, so we're going to turn the console over and lift up that top cover very carefully. And it should come off just like so. We'll set that aside. Alright, now that we have this thing opened up, we can get a better look at what we're working with here. So the next step is we're going to remove the 2 screws that are holding in the battery tray. They're just 2 Phillips head screws, so let's get those out. Alright, now that we got them out, we're going to move the battery tray aside. We're just going to be careful not to mess with those wires that are holding it to the board. You can kind of just set it aside. So now that we have that battery tray moved aside, the next thing we're going to do is remove this connector that's connecting the disk drive to the motherboard. So I should be able to pop it out with my fingers. I'm going to see if I'm going to be able to. So I am having a little bit of trouble removing that connector from the disk drive. So what I'm going to do now is remove the 4 Phillips head screws that are holding in the disk drive to maybe give me a little bit more room so I can kind of work my hand in there to take that connector out. So let's take those screws out. Awesome, so now that we have those 4 Phillips head screws out, I'm just going to move the disk drive forward a little bit to give myself some extra working space. Just going to be very careful not to disturb any wiring too much. Just going to rock it very gently back and forth. There we go. Alright. So now we have the disk drive removed from the console. So now that we have the disk system removed, the next step is to locate these 2 wires on either side of the console. There's like little metal pieces holding them in place. There's one here, and then there's one over here. So what I'm going to do is just bend them up and then carefully release the wire from each side. So we'll start with this side first. I guess I'll just take these needle nose pliers and see if it'll come up. Alright. And that wire came right out. And we'll do the same with the other side. We're just going to slightly bend up that little metal piece that's securing the wire. Very slightly. And hopefully, yep, that wire should come right out. Just going to bend it up a little bit more. And that wire came right out. Alright, now that we have those 2 wires free from those tabs, we're going to turn the disk drive over. And the next step is to remove the 3 Phillips head screws as shown. So we have 1, 2, 3. We're not going to remove that 4th one that's recessed in there. Alright, now we have those 3 screws removed. So now that we have those 3 screws removed, we're just going to simply pull up that bottom half of the base. So now that we have that bottom half of the casing removed, you can kind of see the belt here. It doesn't seem to be in horrible shape, but there's definitely a lot of play in there. So now that we have it open, it's just good practice to replace it and see if that rectifies the problem. So now what we're going to do here is remove these 4 Phillips head screws. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so the next step here is to remove these 3 screws from the metal triangle. There's 1, 2, 3. And those came out easier than expected. I'm going to take my magnetic screwdriver and just lift those screws out. You can see they're a little bit longer than the other ones we've taken out. Cool. So now that we have those 3 screws removed from the metal triangle, we have to pry up this circuit board just a little bit to give us some extra space to work here. And then you're going to rotate this metal triangle clockwise to try to work it out of there. It's kind of hard to explain, but you kind of just have to keep rocking it. You'll eventually find the spot where it can just lift out pretty easily. It's kind of just all done by feel. There we go. Now that we have that triangle free, we can kind of just lift it right out of there. All right. So we finally got that metal triangle out of there, and then here is the old belt. So you can't really tell from the video, but you can kind of see that it's yellowed, and it's definitely more stretched out than these replacement belts that I have, and it for sure lost its elasticity a little bit. Kind of just stays stretched out, so definitely a good candidate for replacement. So let's compare the replacement belt to the one that we just removed. I mean, you can kind of see it here. It's just night and day. That old belt is definitely stretched out for sure. So let's get that new belt installed. It's important to note that the belt goes between one of the legs on this metal triangle. It's the one with the 2 screw holes. So you're going to want to make sure that it's in between that leg when you reinstall it. So you loop it around that one leg, and I've found a lot of success with flipping it over and then kind of just holding it tight from the top. Probably a little hard to see and to explain, but you can see on the bottom here. It's looped around that one leg and kind of just goes over both sides of this side of the triangle, and it's probably going to take me a few tries since this is my first time doing it. We kind of just work our way into there and then make sure that belt is lined up as good as we can get it. Kind of work our way down a little bit. I think we're just about okay. We are just about lined up. Now I'm going to take one of my flathead screwdrivers, kind of lift that belt up around this one side of the pulley, and I think that's it. Let's see. I don't think it's twisted or anything. Yeah, I think we're in good shape here. So now that the belt is moving pretty freely in there and it seems to be situated pretty well, I'm going to reassemble, and reassemble obviously is the reverse of disassembly, so I'm going to speed things up a bit here. Alright, now we should be ready to go, so let's test it out. Alright guys, so here's the moment of truth. I actually disassembled the console a little bit because I am having a little bit of trouble now, unfortunately. We got the new belt in, but we seem to be having another issue that's coming up, so I'm going to show you what's going on. So we'll pop the disc into the drive, and you can see everything seems to be working well. It's trying to read, but then we get this error message. Error 22. So from what I've read, error number 22 is usually caused by a misaligned spindle hub. So we did solve the one problem by replacing the belt, but it looks like I created another one by misaligning that spindle hub. So let's get back into that disk drive and see if we can get it going. Alright, now that we have the disk drive removed, the first thing we're going to do is remove the black top portion of the disk drive. So in order to do that, there's 3 springs that we need to remove. There's 1, 2, and then 3. And just be careful when you're working. You're better off using needle nose pliers, but I don't have small ones right now, so this little puller tool works well. So now that we have those springs removed, we're going to push this white lever on the back here to have the disc card holder descend. It might be a little bit hard to see, but I just stuck a flathead screwdriver in there and just pushed it as far as I could. So from here, we're going to push in the eject lever in order to raise the disc card holder up and push this pressure arm out of the way. So you depress the eject button just enough to have those black tabs be able to lift out. So now that we have them halfway there, we'll hold the eject button and then lift the pressure arm, and then you should just be able to lift the tray right out. So I made a bit of an oversight here. I do need to remove this front plate here before I'm able to lift this tray out. So there's 2 Phillips head screws holding that in. So let's get those out real quick. Okay. So now this should just lift right out, and it does. So the next step is to check the small hole by the spindle right here. So if you do see a white gear through that hole, you flip it over, and then you just rotate this gear here counterclockwise until you don't see the gear. So I'm rotating the gear on the underside of the disk drive here counterclockwise, with the goal being to move this assembly away from the spindle head. So it's slowly but surely moving away. Alright, so here's where we're at. So I rotated this gear on the underside of the disk drive counterclockwise to move this assembly back away from the spindle head. So in doing so, the spindle head is kind of situated towards the front of the disk drive. So we're going to adjust the spindle head assembly here to have the flat side face this black assembly and kind of be parallel with it. So there's a 1.5 millimeter hex head here, so we're going to loosen that. And then we're going to take that head and just spin it around so that it's facing the black assembly back there, like so. So this is a little rigged up here, but I actually broke my Allen key, so this might make things a little bit harder, but I have it in my needle nose pliers here so I can adjust. It actually seemed to have worked. So that's really all we needed to do. So that's how we want to get it aligned. You have that black assembly as far back as you can right here, and then that spindle head is facing the assembly and tightened down as good as we could. So let's get this reassembled to the best of our ability. We'll pop it back into the Famicom Disk System shell, and we'll see if it works. Okay, so let's put this back into the console and test it out. Alright, so we have that disk drive back in the console, so let's power everything on and see how we did. So that's a good sign, we have power. So we'll set the disk in there and see what's going on. No way, we got it going! That is awesome! I honestly didn't think this was going to work out. So we got that belt changed and the spindle was aligned. So there it is, guys. That was the Famicom Disk System belt change and spindle hub adjustment. Now I went into this not too optimistic, especially after I changed the belt, it wasn't working. The spindle hub adjustment I thought was way out of my expertise, but you know, if you take your time, read good instructions, and refer to videos like this, I think pretty much anybody would be in good shape. So if you are thinking about undertaking something like this, just go for it and you'll most likely be fine. So what did you guys think? Please be sure to let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you guys so much for checking out Retro Game Addict. I really do appreciate you all. Have an awesome day, and I will see you on the next one.